Nation, and welcome back to DawgNation At Large. As always, I am Kaylee Mansell with my good friend and good co-host, Connor Riley, who last week, by the way, had one of the hottest takes on DawgNation At Large ever when he said that Tom Petty was just okay. And DawgNation was rightfully upset, but we're going to give Connor the chance to redeem himself right here. Connor, the Rolling Stones are coming to town tomorrow playing in Mercedes-Benz. What are your thoughts on the Rolling Stones?
A great band. I personally enjoy listening to them more than the Beatles. I know they're somewhat contemporaries. Beatles probably a better overall artist. But man, the Stones have some absolute hits. Gimme Shelter, which is played in seemingly every Martin Scorsese movie. Sympathy for the Devil is great. Wild Horses, the acoustic version, is one of my favorite songs. They have some absolute bops.
I am so glad that you said that, and you should be so glad that you said that, because if you would have given any other answer, I would say that if you had a problem with the Stones, you have a problem with me. So that should make for a really good show. Don't know if you completely redeemed yourself, but we will give you a little bit of credit here. So Connor, thank you for your opinion. Glad it was the right one this time. And DawgNation, the Stones aren't going to be the only thing that's rolling this weekend. The Diamond Dawgs will host a Super Regional as they are on a roll right now. And with that, this is DawgNation At Large.
It's the show for the new breed of Georgia Bulldog fan. This is DawgNation At Large with DawgNation insiders Connor Riley and Kaylee Mansell.
All right, enough of the funny stuff. It's time to get serious, because that's what we're here. That's what we're all about here on DawgNation At Large, is being serious. As you can tell, that was sarcasm. I'm sure Connor got that one too. But this is DawgNation At Large. It's basically organized chaos. I am the organized, Connor is the chaos. Some might say vice versa, but only we know the truth. And here is what we have in store for you today on our jam-packed show. Glenn Schumann picks up yet another five-star recruit. Does this put him in the race to become the best recruiter of the Kirby Smart era? And as we mentioned before, the Diamond Dawgs are set to host NC State in an Athens Super Regional. And you know, Connor says it all the time. How can you not be romantic about baseball? So more on that later. Then we're going to talk about what is the most crucial game on the UGA schedule in light of ESPN releasing their most crucial games of the college football season. And then in back-to-back episodes, we've got another Connor Kaylee showdown with an update from last weekend. But first, let's get to Glenn Schumann. Yesterday, five-star linebacker Zayden Walker announces that he is committing to the G. And he's the number one rated linebacker in this class, but Glenn Schumann also signed the number one rated linebacker in the class last year. Connor, gauge it for us. How hard is this to do, really?
I think Glenn Schumann is in his full-blown Elle Woods era, where he's just like, what? It's hard. And this is a guy who just goes out and recruits the best player at the position every year. And more often than not of late, we've seen him go out there and land that player. Last year, it was five-star Justin Williams. He also signed five-star Chris Cole. The year before, you land five-star prospect Raylan Wilson out of Florida, who was wanted by just about everyone in the country. And then they go out this year, and he's recruited so well at this inside linebacker position that I think the Zayden Walker recruitment kind of flew under the radar a little bit, because so many people just assumed that Georgia was going to end up landing him. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what they did. And so it speaks to Schumann and his recruiting ability, his ability to identify top talent early, build strong relationships with them. And then when you factor in what Georgia has gotten out of its inside linebackers of late in recent years, they develop into NFL level players. If you're able to stick with Glenn Schumann throughout the tenure-year career, odds are you're going to go on to be a great player. And even some guys, we're at the point now, I think Javon Dumas-Johnson's a great example. This is a guy a year ago that was being mentioned as a possible Butkus Award winner, but with some of the young players they have coming up, a CJ Allen, a Raylan Wilson, even some of those freshmen we mentioned in Justin Williams and Chris Cole, Dumas-Johnson saw, hey, he was probably going to have some snaps eaten into, and so he elects to go to Kentucky and earn more playing time there. And it just speaks to what Schumann is able to bring in on a year-in, year-out basis.
So with the addition of Zayden Walker, I don't want people to forget that Georgia has already had a signed linebacker in the 2025 class, with that being Buford's four-star linebacker, Jaden Perlotti. So now you have two top-ranked linebackers in your 2025 class already. And I think that the players are starting to recognize that Schumann has a particular kind of linebacker that he likes. And Smile Munden actually commented on this earlier this week. Here's what Smile Munden had to say about Glenn Schumann and his linebacker recruiting.
I really like say the same thing every year with every freshman that come in. Like, it's just like athletes. Like, you see them, like that kind of is the first thing that really jumps off to me personally. Like just how athletic they are. But I feel like they're athletic, smart, hardworking. Like, I feel like Coach Schuman like has a mold, like of the type of guy he brings in, with the guys he brings in. So I feel like they fit right in there.
So what I gathered from that is that Glenn Schumann is a guy that knows exactly what he likes, and because he's so good at his job, he has multiple options. It's not like other schools where you might just have to take a 3-star or a 4-star just to fill that slot. Because Glenn is so good at his job on the recruiting side and as a coach, he's pretty much able to get just about anybody that he wants.
Yeah, and we're seeing now, like we have in years past, because Schumann is able to work so far ahead, because he's already done such a great job filling talent, not dissimilar to what Todd Hartley has done, he's able to work ahead on guys and land guys that can do a variety of different things. You know, yes, we classify so many of these guys as inside linebackers, but to anyone that has watched Georgia football of late, Jamon Dumas-Johnson and Nakobe Dean were not the same type of player. Jayden Walker and Shmuel Munden were not the same type of players. I actually think if you're looking for a player comp for Zayden Walker in terms of who he's going to potentially be at the next level, it actually is a guy like Jayden Walker who's played a lot on the edge, has that ability, not dissimilar from former first-round pick Quay Walker, and learns how to play the inside linebacker position over the course of his career at Georgia. And that just sort of speaks to, I think, the wide-ranging appeal that Georgia and Glenn Schumann in particular have to these linebacker prospects. They are not, well, yes, he has a mold. It's in terms of traits. It's not a one-size-fits-all type of player where they have, sort of regimented, we want a guy to be 6'1", 235 pounds. They win with a variety of different linebackers. They play a variety of different linebackers. And I think that's a big reason why Glenn Schumann is continuously going out and landing the best linebackers in the country.
I think what separates Glenn Schumann from other defensive coordinators and almost puts him on this pedestal is that you can tell that he actually enjoys recruiting. In this day and age where there are so many other factors that come into recruiting, you have to enjoy it to be able to have that work-life balance and want to go to your job every day. And I think we can understand and recognize that Glenn Schumann is passionate about this. We've seen recruiting be the downfall of some guys like Dan Mullen. We knew that Todd Monken didn't really want to recruit. So in this day and age, you have to enjoy the recruitment aspect of it like Glenn Schumann does to be able to continue to do his job to the best of his ability.
And to your point, Kaylee, there's a stark difference between what Glenn Schumann has been able to continue doing since becoming the full-time defensive coordinator from the guy he took the job from in Dan Lanning. Dan Lanning is a great defensive coordinator for Georgia, was a huge piece of those first 2 national championship teams, even though he was only the defensive coordinator for the 2021 team. But as a story that I wrote on DawgNation this morning, you go back and look at the recruiting classes that Georgia was signing once Dan Lanning had been promoted to defensive coordinator starting in 2019. Man, they really fell off in terms of the players they were bringing. Now, yes, they had signed, Nolan Smith, Jermaine Johnson, Azeez Ojulari in back-to-back classes, and those guys have all gone on to be high draft picks. But in 2020, you only bring in MJ Sherman, and 2021, you only bring in Chaz Chambliss. And then that 2022 class, which he wasn't even around for when those guys finally got to campus, all 3 of those guys have already transferred out of the class. And so they are right now, I think, trying to play catch up at that outside linebacker position. At some point in time, Glenn Schumann is going to follow in the footsteps of Dan Lanning and go be probably a high-level Power 4 coach somewhere. But because of the way that he's continued to recruit at the University of Georgia, I think the Bulldogs are going to be more than fine at that inside linebacker position, even in the reality knowing that you're going to see guys potentially transfer out of the program because that's just sort of the world we live in. It speaks to what Schumann does well and what makes him, I think, unique as a defensive coordinator in this day and age.
So when you look at the numbers, he has the number 1 linebacker in the class in back-to-back years commit. He has also signed 4 former 5-stars, I believe. When you look at those numbers, is it safe to say that Glenn Schumann is on track to be one of the best recruiters of the Kirby Smart era?
Absolutely, if he's not already. Now, part of what helps him is the fact that he's been around at Georgia for the longest. He's the last remaining member of Kirby Smart's first assistant coaching staff here at the University of Georgia when Smart came over in 2016. So he does have the benefit of time there. But you look at what other hauls they've brought in. Trey Scott's done some great work on the defensive line. Del McGee obviously did a lot of really good work for a long time at the running back position. And I think right now Todd Hartley is on a similar heater at the tight end position. If there's someone who I think can potentially catch Schuman, it is Todd Hartley. But for right now, when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to position coaches at the University of Georgia, Glenn Schumann is the standard for the Bulldogs in terms of an assistant, in terms of what Kirby Smart looks for. And that's what other assistant coaches, in my mind, are going to be measured against going forward.
So not only is he a great recruiter, but he also has to be a good coach. It's two completely separate things that eventually come into one because you have to develop them. But, I mean, you have to be elite at both of them to be at Glenn Schumann status. And Connor's favorite player, Zayden Walker, was able to recognize this. Here is what Zayden Walker had to say about Glenn Schumann's coaching abilities.
Coach Schuman, great inside backer coach. You know, he's a very attention to detail guy. Glad to call him my defensive coordinator and one of my position coaches. You know, he's a very smart individual. He's always scheming something up for benefit for not only me, but for the team.
I mean, leave it to Connor to make sure that Zayden Walker gets included in the show.
We just got to find a way to get my guy out there, not let people forget. He was recently named to the Lott Impact Trophy preseason watch list. I think he's going to have a great season playing for not just a good coach, but a great coach in Glenn Schumann.
So how does this whole scenario change with Glenn Schumann now becoming like the single defensive, or with bringing Travaris Robinson in, Will Muschamp comes out? Kind of how does his role change, if it does at all?
In some ways it is. I think we saw a little bit of that shift last year where year one, and there was maybe hand-holding feels maybe too strong of a word, but he and Will Muschamp worked, I think, closer together in terms of calling the defense, in terms of working things out. Now with Muschamp moving to an analyst role, not going to be around much on Saturdays as he follows his son Whit Muschamp at Vanderbilt on the weekends. I think how he and Robinson interact together is going to be something very interesting to watch this fall. It's something when we do get the chance to talk to Glenn Schumann, I think it's something I'm excited to learn a little bit more about. But this is Glenn Schumann's third year as a defensive coordinator at the University of Georgia. I think it's a chance for him to really put his stamp on this defense. And you think what Dan Lanning did in his third season as the defensive coordinator here at Georgia. That was when Georgia had that great 2021 defense, led them to a national championship. The expectation is for Georgia to go out there and do the same. Now, they might not have the monsters on that defensive line this year that they did in years past, but this linebacker room, I think, has the potential to be every bit as good as that one was, led by Nakobe Dean, Channing Tindall, and Quay Walker. They are that deep and that talented at that inside linebacker position this year.
Okay, Connor, I'm going to ask you the million-dollar question that nobody wants the answer to, but it needs to be asked. How much longer will Glenn Schumann be around this program?
I think longer than some people might expect. I think the fact that he's already been here for this long is certainly a win for Georgia. And as we've seen, I think Schumann, much like Kirby Smart did, is going to wait for the right job to open up. He's not just going to take a job just to take a job. And I think in today's day and age, and this is a point Brandon Adams has made, you know, the old ways of just taking a G5 job and trying to work your way up, I think like Billy Napier did, going from Louisiana to Florida, I think those days are gone. And so I think if you're Schumann and you continue to win at Georgia and you continue to recruit well, ultimately some program is going to wise up and come and try and hire you. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if maybe Florida moves on from Billy Napier this year and tries to target someone like Glenn Schumann. I'm sure there'd be a lot of Georgia fans sitting on their hands, you know, hoping that doesn't happen. But it would take, I think, a job like that. You saw the success that Dan Lanning had right away at Oregon, where he walked into a similarly great job. I think that's what it would take, because Glenn Schumann is one of the highest paid assistant coaches in the country, making over $1.7 million. So he's not simply going to take a job for a slight pay bump and a little bit more responsibility. I think he knows he's got a young family, he's got another baby on the way. There's not exactly a rush to go out and just grab a job to grab a job. I think he's going to continue to be patient, knowing that as it stands, he's got one of the best jobs in the country as Georgia's defensive coordinator.
With that, we will come to a close on the Glenn Schumann discussion for now. But as the recruiting trail is just getting started, I imagine that we'll circle back to all the pickups that Glenn Schumann will have this summer. And with that, Dog Nation, if you can't watch us on video, you can listen to us in podcast format and take us on the go with you. Whether you listen on Apple or Spotify, all of our shows are available in podcast format. So make sure to check those out, even if you can't be here with us on Thursday nights at 7 o'clock. And next, we are going to move on to the hottest team at UGA right now, and that is the Diamond Dawgs. The Diamond Dawgs are set to host NC State in a super regional, with the first game being Saturday at noon, the second game being Sunday at noon, and if necessary, hopefully it will not be, a game 3 on Monday. Connor, think about this time last year, where the program was, the culture around the program, and where they're at this year. I don't think that anybody could have expected that the Diamond Dawgs would be the team that Dog Nation would rally behind.
No, first year under Wes Johnson, and this is a Wes Johnson hire that was, I think, somewhat panned by the national baseball media and even some Georgia fans when it was made. To get to a super regional in his first season, something they haven't done since 2008, already makes this a great season for Georgia. You've obviously had Charlie Condon had, in my mind, the best single season that a Georgia baseball player has ever had. And so now you get a chance to continue to build off that. It's not every day you get to host a super regional at a place like Georgia. And the fact you already made it this far is great. But now that you're here, you win 2 games, you get to go to Omaha for the first time since 2008 and really, I think, continue to propel this program forward. Everything that comes from this point forward for Georgia, it is building on future success. You've shown the proof of concept, if you're Wes Johnson, that you can find a way to get to a regional and using the personnel that you have at your disposal. Wes Johnson is obviously a well-regarded pitching coach. That's why he was brought in. His work with Paul Skeens earned him a lot of praise this time last year. This team has won with its offense this year, and Johnson, to his credit, has found a way to get enough out of this pitching staff to where now they're playing NC State, a very good baseball team, number 10 overall seed, with a chance to go to Omaha. And so I don't think that anyone thought that this was where we would be, certainly after that first SEC weekend where they get swept by Kentucky. Kentucky's the number 2 team in the country and also playing in a super regional this weekend. And so I think you've got a Georgia program that is poised to continue to build off this. And if they're able to go to Omaha, we saw Georgia fans really buy in this past week against Georgia Tech. I think it has a chance to explode this weekend against NC State.
I mean, yeah, they definitely bought in, considering tickets for this sold out in less than 5 minutes. Now, granted, the ticket operation was a little bit complicated, but in my mind, not only is this so good for the program, but just morale amongst the UGA fan base. A lot of UGA fans are also Braves fans, and the Braves have dealt with a lot of injury this season, and I think that excitement around the Braves has decreased right as the morale for Georgia baseball has increased. And seeing all of the videos from the stadium this past weekend, it really brought me so much joy, and I think that Dog Nation feels the same way.
Yeah, Georgia fans, I think, have somewhat been starved for a program other than football to really dominate sort of the offseason in terms of going on a big run. Could have been women's basketball, men's basketball, obviously there as well. That baseball has finally done that, I think, shows just how hungry this fan base is. Right now, in my mind, Tennessee is sort of the standard of what you want to be in college baseball. And a few years ago, Tennessee was not a great program, but the job that Tony Vitello has come in and done, I think, has set them up where, they have a chance, if they advance this weekend, to go to their 3rd College World Series in the last 4 years. And while they haven't won a national championship yet, if you're there consistently, eventually I think things are going to break right for you in that regard. That's where Georgia is now trying to get to. And so you bring up the Braves. I think the Braves are going to be fine. I have said, now that Ronald Acuna is out, they're going to go on and win the World Series this year, just like they did in 2021. And, Georgia, look, I don't know if they have the pitching to win in Omaha, but they have the bats that can absolutely get them there. And so if you're able to do that, I think that only gives you a brighter level of encouragement for what this program can be in the future. And I do want to shout out our wonderful producer, Cody Chaffins.
Yes.
You guys can check him out, the work that he has done on our YouTube page. If you're there, like all of the videos that he has done, just make sure you're subscribed to the Dog Nation YouTube page. But really check out those videos because he's got stuff for the diehards. But also, if you're someone who is new to the bandwagon, you can jump right in, and he's got everything that you need to have right there. So I would highly encourage you to check that out, along with all of other Dog Nation's wonderful baseball coverage that we have coming from this weekend.
We've said it once, and we will say it again. There is nobody that works harder than our friend Cody Chaffins. All right. I want to backtrack. You did mention the fact that the last time that UGA went to the College World Series was in 2008 when they defeated NC State in the Super Regional. Connor, does history repeat itself?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
That did not seem convincing. That did not.
Look, NC State is a program that has been here before. And while Georgia is 4-0 against ACC teams this year, there is an experience factor with NC State that I think cannot be overlooked. And so, with Georgia, look, it was a little nervy last week, and certainly against Georgia Tech there, where they load the bases in both the 9th and 10th innings there. But Georgia showed some real mettle last week, coming back against Army, coming back against Georgia Tech. And I don't want to say team of destiny or anything like that, but Georgia's found ways to win when they haven't necessarily played great. And yes, Charlie Condon, he had a great first game against Army. They won that game against Georgia Tech in part because of everyone around Charlie Condon. Corey Collins had a clutch a 2-run double in extra innings. Trey Harris had a big 8th inning home run. Colby Branch, who had a grand slam in Saturday's game, ties it up in the 9th inning on Sunday against Georgia Tech. So it is a team around Condon that is playing well. And oh, by the way, you also do happen to have the best player in college baseball in Charlie Condon on your team right now as well.
Mike Griffith had Jeff Dantzler on his On the Beat show this past Monday. If you have not watched it, I would highly encourage you to. And the point that Connor brought up is the same point that Jeff made, and that's the fact that, yes, you've got Charlie Condon, the best player in college baseball as of right now, but what really could drive this Georgia team to Omaha is the fact that 1 through 9 is solid. From start to beginning, there are no weak spots, at least in the lineup. I think that it's easy to recognize that pitching is what ultimately could be the downfall. But when you look at that lineup, 1 through 9, every single one of those guys is capable of making a clutch hit, and they have bought into what Wes Johnson has been selling them. And I could go on and on about the impact that Wes Johnson's made, but I think it's important to note that, yes, we talk about Charlie Condon a lot, as we should, but it's 1 through 9 that wins games, not number 1.
Right, and you saw Georgia Tech do this last week, cowardly might I add, but they pitched around Condon. They walked him. They were saying, hey, we're going to put him on first and dare these other guys to beat us. And that's what Georgia was able to do late in that game. At NC State, I think they're going to start off trying to pitch to Condon, and if Condon starts hitting bombs like he has done all season, they're going to adjust from there, and they're going to try and force the other hitters to have to beat them. I think Georgia has shown to this point they're capable of doing that. They're playing their best ball at the end of the season. They sweep South Carolina. They play really well on the road against Texas A&M to get the big win over Clemson. I think this is a team that, because of what they've seen in the SEC on a week-in, week-out basis, they're not going to be afraid of NC State coming in that experience. But I'll be interested in seeing how this pitching staff holds up over the course of the weekend here.
And on the show, we are all about fun. So I do have to bring this up because it may be one of the best moments I've seen on social media in a long time. Obviously, Army got knocked out of the regional early on, and then they decided to go to Kudzu Hill and celebrate with the rest of DawgNation, and they were there to call the dogs. And it's memories like those that don't happen without sports. And I know that Army has now made another fan base because the Georgia fans will be rooting for them. It's just moments like that don't happen without sports, and it's so special to see.
So you're saying Georgia wasn't rooting for the Army prior to them?
I knew that I had to be. I did not have that in my notes. We had to bring it up. I knew I had to go about that in a specific way, especially because, I have military family, but they're not the University of Army. I wanted to say that, but that's just not right. The school, Georgia will be rooting for Army sports from here on out. Does that work? Am I going to get canceled? I like
to think that Georgia is always supporting the troops and always supporting the military.
Always.
Much like the military was supporting the Dogs this weekend in the Athens Regional.
All right, yeah. Let's go with that. Nobody cancel me. You understand what I'm getting that there. My grandfather was in the Navy. I love him very much. I love listening to his stories. Always been a big fan of the troops. Okay, Connor already said it, which was absolutely fantastic. But whether you're just now hopping on the bandwagon, you need to catch up, or you can't get enough of Georgia baseball content, DawgNation has you covered. whether that's on video with Mike Griffith, Cody Chaffins, and Jack Leo on YouTube, or you can check out all the articles that we've done on DawgNation.com. And if you can't stream the game or you can't be in person, we will be having live updates from the game on our DawgNation Twitter page. So make sure to go check out all of our stuff to keep up with all things Georgia baseball. Next, we're going to transition. We're going to make this quick. I want to see what Connor has to say about this. ESPN released its list of the most important games in college football this season, clearly with one of them being Georgia-Texas. Connor, the simple question is Georgia-Texas obviously, without a doubt, the most important game on Georgia's schedule?
No. Not even close, in my opinion. I actually think, for me, it's the Alabama game, simply because of the history that has existed between Georgia and Alabama. With Nick Saban moving on, I think there's a chance to reset the narrative a little bit here when it comes to Alabama. Kirby Smart is 1-5 in his career against his former employer in Alabama. Now, all those games came against Nick Saban, who is the greatest college football coach of all time. And so I think that this Alabama team, you get them early in the season. I think that's maybe a good thing for Georgia, because it is going to be on the road in a hostile environment there in Tuscaloosa, where they're going to be geared up and ready for that game. I think you get a chance to get them before they really figure out who they are. It's still a really talented Alabama team. They didn't lose everybody. Yes, they lost some key pieces, but they're going to be able to figure some things out. And so if you're Georgia, that September 28th game, to me, both from within this season, that's going to give us a great idea of if Georgia is, in fact, I think, the number one team in the country early on in the year, because I think Ohio State doesn't have a game of that magnitude until they play Oregon on October 12th in this season, but also just from a 10,000-foot view of where Alabama and Georgia are in comparison to each other. Because if Georgia does lose that game, there are going to be a lot of uncomfortable conversations, I think, that need to be had if that is a result that continues to happen, even with Nick Saban not being there.
So let me pick your brain here for a second. Are importance and difficulty synonymous? Like, because Alabama is the most important game, does that mean it's the most difficult opponent, or is that just the most important game that they need to establish that Georgia's still on top? Like, what's your criteria?
I think that, for me, it's the latter part of what you said there. It's what Georgia, I think, needs to stay on top. Personally, I actually think a game that might be more difficult is that November 9th trip to Ole Miss, or that November 16th home game against Tennessee, just because of where it falls in the season. You'll have played Alabama, you'll have played Texas already, you'll have played Florida. It's a stretch run in the season, and you know that Georgia team has already, by that point, we're going to know if Georgia's a college football playoff team or not when they go and play Ole Miss and when they play Tennessee at home. And so those two games back-to-back represent an interesting challenge. And so I think those games, because of where they fall on the schedule and the difficulty that comes from just having to play that well for that many weeks in a row, is what makes those games difficult. Whereas with Alabama, it's a far more important game in my mind, but you do get a bye week before it. It is early in the season. So in theory, you should be pretty healthy there for that game. And while, yes, it's on the road, this Georgia team has shown that it is not afraid to go into someone else's house and beat the absolute tar out of them. So I think from an importance standpoint, it's Alabama. From a difficulty standpoint, I could see either that Tennessee game or that Ole Miss game at the end of the season.
Connor already looking ahead to the postseason. And speaking of postseason, we've got another Connor Kaylee showdown.
It's time for the Connor Kaylee Showdown.
Yo, we're like a Glenn Schumann over here, getting back to back, getting ready for another Connor Kaylee showdown. And this one is going to be all about postseason. But before we get to this next one, we need a little bit of an accountability check from last week's show, since our friend Cody Chaffins could not be here. So he's going to go ahead and let us know who won last week's and set us up for the next Connor Kaylee showdown.
Yeah, first off, I really appreciate you guys going ahead and already trying to butter me up by mentioning the baseball videos with Mike Griffith and all the baseball coverage. By the way, we dropped a new video, me and Mike, with a series preview right now on our DawgNation YouTube channel. So check that out after you finish watching this show. All right. So, like you said, I was on the beach. No, I was up at baseball practice last week when you guys talked about your summer vibes Connor Kaylee showdown. So I've got to make an official ruling on that. So first, let's go back and see what our choices were. Let's see what Kaylee had on her list. No, well, Kaylee had number 1 overall pick.
I've never looked better.
Was chips on a sandwich. Yeah, this is what, by the way, what I put together your list, and this is what it put together. So it's a beautiful brown-haired person with the windows down. That was your number 2, with a sweet treat. Now, you just said sweet treat. You didn't say ice cream, and I don't know if you were trying to include the lactose intolerant crowd out there, but we think you meant ice cream, right? And also easy packing. I didn't quite understand the easy pack. And then longer days. So those were your choices. Let's see what Connor came up with in his summer vibes draft. And look at Connor. He's never looked better. Eating a hot dog on the beach, listening to the song of the summer while watching a summer a blockbuster or The Bear season 2 on his phone right there. So Connor had the beach, hot dog, summer blockbuster, song of the summer, and The Bear season 2. After careful consideration, I'm going to have to give this one to Connor.
I saw that coming.
The easy packing and the chips on a sandwich just didn't scream summer to me. So, yes, we will add that up to Connor. He is now up 3-1 in our Connor-Kaylee showdown. As for this week's Connor-Kaylee showdown, here's what we're going to do. With Georgia baseball being in the postseason and the kind of different postseason that college baseball presents. You got the regional with 4 different teams. They kind of play a round-robin double elimination thing there. Then you move on to the super regional, where it's just a plain old best-of-3 series. Then you'd move on to the College World Series, which is like split brackets. Winner of each of those brackets then plays a final series, which we're seeing in the Women's College World Series right now. So that's kind of a wonky, a little strange postseason. So we wanted to know, what is your favorite NCAA postseason? So go ahead, and I will let Kaylee go first. What is your favorite NCAA postseason?
First, let me just say, I know a lot of teams that have been down 3-1 that have come back to win it all. So I'm not too distraught by this. All right, I mean, it's pretty obvious to me, and I will die on this hill, that the best NCAA postseason tournament is March Madness. No other postseason brings the same level of excitement. You get ready every year to take that first day off of work. You make your brackets. You go all in on college basketball when you probably haven't watched a single college basketball game all year. But when the postseason rolls around, you suddenly become an expert who knows what's going on. I've got a lot of points on this, so I'm going to get through them. First off, the sheer number of teams it is. I don't know if this could work in any other sport except maybe baseball, softball, but I love the amount of teams because it allows light to be shown on smaller schools. For example, I went to the great Kennesaw State University, and freshman and sophomore year of college, nobody knew where I went to school. But when Kennesaw State made the tournament, all of a sudden I say I go to Kennesaw State, and they're like, oh, that's the school that almost upset Xavier. So sheer number of teams is the first reason that I love it. Okay, and now I also love the way that they have the tournament designed out. Like, it's designed to ensure that there are no rematches until the Sweet 16, so you're getting good competition. Love single elimination because it makes every game just as important as the last. Every game has that high intensity on the edge of your seat. It's do or die from the beginning. I love that. And then the nature of basketball just allows for far more upsets than any other sport. I mean, between fast flow, like the personal fouls mean a lot more because you don't want to see your favorite players foul out. And there's potential for one player to take over the entire game. It's not like that in any other sport. And like the upsets, Loyola Chicago is not going to upset Kentucky in any other sport other than basketball. And speaking of Loyola Chicago, that brings up my last point about why March Madness is the best postseason tournament, and that is because who does not love a good Cinderella story? Teams like Loyola Chicago, St. Petersburg, Florida Gulf Coast, you are never going to see them dominate in any other sport but basketball. The playing field is just so much more level in the sport, and it just makes it bring that much more excitement. So if you don't think that March Madness is the best postseason NCAA tournament, there's something wrong with you. Just as wrong as Connor saying that Tom Petty is just okay. Boom. Mic drop. Thank you.
All right, yeah, you almost had a delay of game on there. I was just about to throw the flag, and you kept making more. We get it. You love March Madness. All right, Connor, What is your favorite NCAA postseason?
Look, Kaylee made a lot of great points, but ultimately it's actually the women's NCAA tournament that is the single best way to determine it. And there are some key differences between March Madness and the women's tournament. One, 64 teams is the perfect amount of teams. You don't need 68 teams like the men's team has as they try to milk every last dime out of there. Two, I like that the opening rounds are on the top seeds' home floor. I think you should reward the elite teams because, while yes, you enjoy upsets every once in a while, I don't want to see St. Peter's getting bludgeoned by North Carolina in the Elite Eight. I don't want to see those teams get blown out in the Final Four in the event that they make it there. I want to see the best teams and the best players in the second and in the third weekends. And I think that is what the women's tournament does so well. And a big reason you've seen the women's tournament have so much success because we've gotten Caitlin Clark there every year. We've gotten Angel Reese there every year. South Carolina is going to be a staple in the Final Four. UConn had a nice run this year. USC with Juju Watkins is going to do this in years to come. You get these elite programs that are there every single year, and you build a familiarity with them. So while, yes, you might have a one-off year where you do have someone make a deep run into the tournament, you're also going to have the star power that comes with it because at the end of the day, when you're crowning a champion, you're trying to crown the best team possible. And I just don't believe that happens enough in the men's version of the NCAA tournament. Whereas on the women's side, I absolutely believe that the best team wins it every year while still getting to enjoy many of the perks that are set up by the 64-team format. So I am actually going with the women's NCAA tournament as the best postseason format in the NCAA.
All right, very interesting. We got the men's tournament and the women's tournament, and there definitely are differences, Connor. I appreciate that. One thing I will mention is that nobody has mentioned this new college football playoff format, and that's because we haven't played it yet. But after they released the schedule this week of all the games, and it all started to become real, you got game times for the Orange Bowl and for the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl and for the national championship game this year on MLK Day in the city of Atlanta. I'm very excited about that. So can't wait to see what that's going to bring. Can it bring some of those moments, like you guys said, in those NCAA tournaments that we see for men's and women's basketball? Now, when it comes to this ruling, here is my ruling on this, and I will have to say, although recency bias will definitely tell us the women's tournament has been so much fun to watch when you have the athletes who have been those superstar athletes who are starting to, fight against one another, whether it's Angel Reese going against Caitlin Clark. It is so much fun. And although it is, to me, low-hanging fruit to pick the men's basketball tournament, we haven't had a Sister Jean moment. We haven't had some of those fun upsets in one shining moment with the men's tournament. I think that one has to win this week. So we are going to give this one to Kaylee. It is now, let's check the scoreboard, 3-2. You're almost going to get run out of the building, Kaylee, but you're back in this thing 3-2 in our Connor-Kaylee showdown for this week.
Well, there's only one of us in this conversation that's in the building, so.
Congratulations, Kaylee, on your second win. It's been a long time coming.
My future is so bright. I gotta wear these big old shades. Let's go. I'm not gonna dog on you too much here. I love that you went the women's route, Connor Riley. Big supporter of women's sports. Who can complain about that?
Look, I still believe my answer is correct. As great as Jack Golke and Oakland were, I don't need to see them in the Final Four at the expense of, say, a Reed Shepherd in a Kentucky or, in the women's side, a Caitlin Clark. And so I enjoy watching great teams win, and I think the women's side just does that at a better rate than the men's side does.
And Connor, please tell everyone what woman we are rooting for this year.
In what sport?
In basketball, women's basketball.
I mean, Juju Watkins, I'm really excited to see what she
about.
does and how she plays. I think she's poised to take over the sport and I think be the number one name in the sport this year.
Are you serious right now?
I'm very
serious.
He's
trying to say we are rooting for Paige Beckers. Connor and I both. We've had this conversation. He just didn't want to go the easy route. We stand behind, like Juju Watkins. She's going to be the new face, but there is another player we can't forget about, and that is Mrs. Paige Beckers, who is going to have an outstanding year and may lead UConn to another national championship.
No, Caitlin Clark, though. I actually believe Caitlin is better than Paige, but I know Kaylee doesn't feel that same way. So
that's not true. There's two different criteria that I'm looking at here. We're not going to get into that, though. Okay, Connor, you are supposed to learn something new every single day. Tell me what you learned from today's show.
I learned that Kaylee is a big fan of March Madness today. Bigger, certainly, I think, than I am, given her love for upsets and underdogs.
I mean, who doesn't love an underdog? Some might call the Diamond Dawgs an underdog.
They're the number 7 overall seed.
Okay, but think about where they were when they started. They were an underdog.
I don't love underdogs. I like rooting for favorites. I like rooting for the big team to win. I like rooting for greatness.
And that is everything that is wrong with Connor Riley.
Celtics in 5, baby. Title number 18 coming your way shortly. Very excited for the finals this week. Another juggernaut, best team in the NBA this season, going to take it home. I root for greatness.
We got to get out of here before I get sick. And if you were wondering about the sunglasses, well, all I got to say is if you know, you know. And I hope you all know that this, well, I mean, there we go. Now you know. In case you didn't, wow. To be the recruit that got Kirby to put sunglasses on, he must really want that man.
Is there a recruit one day that Kirby would want bad enough to let him cut his hair?
Ooh, I don't think that recruit is out there.
Yeah.
Not yet.
It's a fair question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll let that one circle back around. All right. This has been another entertaining episode of DawgNation at Large. The score with Connor Kaylee Showdown is now at Connor 3. Me too. Still a lot of gameplay left to go. As always, DawgNation, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you right back here next Thursday at 7 o'clock. Don't miss it.